you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. And now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers, everybody. It's Freewheeling Friday. Get your Q&A in. Laura will throw it up in my live chat, and we'll get to it at the end so we can answer as many questions as possible. We're going to do Maine today, a voter analysis. We haven't done one of these in a while, and it's backed by popular demand. People have been asking about Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut, outside of the usual states. So that's what we're going to do. And then also, too, I think, it's time we have a little refresher course on some basics, like the difference between a sampling error, a margin of error. Why do we say sampling error in these modern days when everybody used to say margin of error? And is margin of error even correct? What's a confidence interval? What's the difference? And then also, of course, I'm hearing a lot of things like so-and-so improved 2 points or 4 points even in a poll where the sampling error is 4.5 points, and this person fell a point, or that person went up a point, or Mike Pence got a bump because he got 2 points. And we have to go over something called statistical noise and what that means when it comes with sampling errors. All right, because we're making too much about little things that really have no significance. That's the short answer. The long answer is coming up. But first, let's do Maine. All right, so let's first and foremost go to the boring part, which is the printed out PDF of a voter analysis that we do. And locals and YouTube, you'll get this. By the way, the end of the month is coming. So if you want to jump over to locals before the change comes, the tier comes, which means it'll cost slightly more monthly, but you can grandfather yourself in right now. Do it now. And YouTube, use the code I gave you in the community notes, the community comments, because that'll take if like you just paid for YouTube, for instance, right? That's going to take that cost off the top. All right. So, all right, let's pull this up. But don't forget, it happens at the end of the month or the start of this new month. We have a lot of things coming. These things that are worthwhile aren't cheap. Let me get some light, extra light in here. It's dark, isn't it? Looks dark in here. About to rock the brick house hat. All right. This is the voter analysis report. Very simple, that I printed up from the great state of Maine, otherwise known as the Pine Tree State. Every state has these cute little nicknames that I love, that I actually love to run. All right. So looking at it just off the top. And then by the way, we're going to look at this, and then we're going to look at how people identify, regardless of registration. How do they identify in the state of Maine? Okay. And how have they over the last couple cycles? All right. And let's go back to, say, Mitt Romney's performance in the state of Maine to see if anything has changed. There are a lot of crazy different county names and and I'm not going to pronounce them correctly because I'm not a native of Maine. All right. But, I'm going to do what I normally do when we get into these locations, to paint a picture of who lives in these areas, right? And somebody you can identify with. I'm going to do my best at it anyway. All right, so about 35% Democrat, about 28% Republican, 32% none, just no affiliation. And then you have some minor parties. You have a nice chunk of green vote, which is about 4.1, right, if you're rounding. All right. Libertarian is not a very strong presence in the state of Maine. And, of course, unaffiliated is only a couple of thousand. Maine has an extremely high participation rate. While there are about 1 million voters in the state of Maine, there will be about 800,000 votes in a presidential election cycle. I know it's a huge turnout rate in this state, but in some of these New England states, there's been a long and proud tradition of high participation. So people will say, "Oh, funny business." really has always been the case. You could even go back to 2012 and see that there was an extraordinarily high participation rate in the state of Maine. Same thing goes for states like New Hampshire, by the way. Minnesota in the in the Midwest has had or North Midwest really, but has had a very long tradition of extremely high participation. All right, so I'm trying to run this little rooftop analysis to show you, but sometimes it just doesn't like to work, especially on the fly when I have this much going. But it doesn't matter because we're going to show you generally, obviously, who performs in what areas better. All right. So when you're looking at places like York, Cumberland, that's going to be a more Democratic area. Obviously, people think of Maine and they think of Bangor, right? They think of Portland, which is in by Cumberland. That's very, very, very liberal. That makes up the first congressional district. But we'll get into all that. All right. And actually, I should have ran this by congressional district, and I can show you the difference in the parties by congressional. And in fact, while we're looking at this, I'm just going to run another one real quick because I like that idea. All right. Let me add age back to this one. Let me add ideology back to this one. Ideology is interesting too, because you're going to see how, based on vote pattern, a machine learning model will profile voters and how much more liberal Maine is in the profiling because of who they're voting for and maybe who even they're donating to, for instance, or what. There are many things, many attributes in the database that will peg you as a liberal. All right. But when they're asked by exit poll interviewers, by pollsters, they don't necessarily call themselves liberal. Many of these people that are overlapping in this analysis, they'll call themselves moderate. The problem is, for now, those older moderate voters, particularly 65 and above, are a lot like, there's many of them that still vote like they're 18 to 25 or 18 to 24. There's an older section of Maine that is very liberal, right? They go and it's old money, and they go and bank out the rest of their years in Portland. Think Poppy Bush. And I know he calls himself a Republican, but that may be even a great example, or called himself a Republican. That may be an even better example. Think about Poppy Bush. Is he really a conservative? Of course not. Is he super liberal? Of course not. But I'll tell you what, there are probably more than one people in the Bush family that would be pegged as a liberal in the voter analysis in the state of Maine, simply because of causes that they've funded or championed or supported, and how their vote history goes. Primary have they voted in, right? So if there's several attributes like primary vote history, a donation to a certain candidate, if there's several attributes that indicate that you are that Democratic, it'll peg you as a liberal. All right. What did I just say? Congressional district, right? Yeah. And make sure it's the new districts. Congressional district, UPS, no, USPS. Just getting, there's so many attributes. It's honestly getting a little bit crazy. All right. So I'm going to generate a new one, and then I'm going to pull it up because we're going to look at it with the new one. I'd rather look at the new one. And it'll show right in the same window as soon as it's done. All right, but while we're doing that, it is, obviously, like most places, more female than male, 52 to 47, with about 2% unknown. That happens, all right, quite a bit. You'll see when you're looking at the voter analysis, you have a stark divide in the state of Maine when it comes to income. Okay, there's a lot that's unknown, but looking at, for instance, exit polling, you can see that there is a very big divide in the state of Maine when it comes to how much money you make. There's some areas, those liberal areas that we were just talking about, that make a lot of money. And interestingly enough, in the second district, there's a little bit of both. And the second district is not, I can't say more Republican because that's not really true. Republicans have been struggling in this area for a long time when it comes to that. In the Trump era, things have changed quite a bit. Now, how much? A lot. And we're going to see that when we look at how badly Barack Obama did, for instance. It's loading up now. So we'll give it a second while it does its thing. Here we go. Let it load. And then I'm going to put this in here because I want to show you the difference. There we go. It's doing its thing. Load up, load up, load up. Okay. All right. So, interestingly enough, when you see the exit polling in the Trump era on how people identify, you identify as a Republican, a Democrat, whatever, there were a lot more people who are, frankly, either not affiliated at all with any party or have nothing. They're nuns in the state of Maine. They identify more as Republican than they have in the past. That's just the truth. And in the Trump era, the presidential vote, the advantage, let's say the Democratic advantage in the state of Maine in the Trump era has been cut in half since the days of Mitt Romney and John McCain. So as you can see, there's a lot. It's not very married compared to some others that we know. It's a very, very, very white state, right? Even more white than that. There's a whole lot of unknown. And education level, there is a good degree of completed college, but they don't really know where they're at. And that's par for the course of very unknown state. How can I put this? You're going to know more about people in Florida, for instance, than you will about people in a state like Maine. Okay. And religion-wise, there's still a significant number of Protestants. There are a significant number of Catholics that goes from the old as far. Let's talk history here. Who settled in Maine years and years and years ago, folks, right? You had two groups. You had Protestants and Congregationalists, and then more prevalent to our discussion today, you had French Canadian settlers that were Catholic. And they tend, by the way, to be more liberal than some of the Protestants in certain areas of the state. When you're looking at like the 2nd Congressional District, for instance, they tend to be more liberal or have historically, although some of that has changed depending on the geography of the state. And so looking at it by age, when you're looking at a presidential election, it's not that young. 18 to 29 makes up about 15% of the vote. That's about it. And in the last one, I believe it was 15 on the dot. Let me look at 2016, see if it was the same amount. In 2016, it was more. So it's becoming, it's getting older in the electorate. In 2016, it was 19%. And actually, Trump did very well against Hillary Clinton among that age group. He did worse in the 18 to 29 against Biden, and there's a reason for that. We're going to talk about that. But generally, it is getting to be an older state. There's just not the youth vote there used to be. All right, and you can see that here, all the way to the 18 to 24. It's not a lot anymore. It's not like it was during the Al Gore days, during the John Kerry days. All right. And I know that's like every single age. I'm going to give this to you guys on Locals and YouTube, and you can go through it in more detail. There's so much that I want to go over this episode that I'm not going to really get into. Oh, by the way, you want to talk about how dirty voter files can be? Now that we're on YouTube and we're allowed to talk about it, let's take a look at Maine's voter files. Let's take a look at. Are you guys seeing this? That's Maine for you. That's the voter file for you. There's still somebody, I think, like 140 years old on the voter file in California. This is just the way things are. And the media's claim that this is just impossible for something like this to happen, something like this to be exploited, is the biggest scam in modern electoral politics coverage, I guess, news coverage. It's a total scam. When I say Maine's an old state, I don't mean this old. All right? There aren't people in Maine that are 120 years old, even 110 years old. And for people who can't see what I'm talking about, 345 records that indicate they're 100 years old, 341 records that indicate they're 101 years old, 245 records that indicate they're 102 years old, 215 records that indicate they're 103 years old, 166 records that indicate they're 144, 123 records that indicate they're 105 years old, 129 records that indicate they're 106 years old, 96 that indicate they're 107 years old, 47, 108, 31, 109, 21, 110, 8, 111, 7, 112, blah, 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 blah. There are 13 records of 118-year-olds, folks. This is why, actually, pro tip for the day for pollsters who are listening, if you are not doing age parameters when you're doing your queries to pull off of the voter file, you are messing up. Same thing even if you're using an online panel. If you are not doing 18 to 100, and I do 100, I do. If you're not doing 18 to 100, you're screwed. You're screwing yourself. Some of these states, this is a small state, folks. Some of these states, excuse me, frog in the throat. Some of these states, are a lot bigger and have a lot more dirt in them. That's why I say they're dirty. It's a dirty file. All right, look at this. There are, first of all, we can do congressional district really quick. The first is more populated with 52. The second is 48.5. That changed somewhat in redistricting. All right, but conservative, 25.8% based on all of the attributes, voting history, donations we talked about. I want to give away some of them, but have been pegged as conservative. 42.5% have been pegged as liberal. Only 9% moderate, and 22.8, rounding to 23, are unknown. You can put most of them in the moderate category, and the truth is that this 42.5 in liberal is just too high. It's based on their old vote history. Here's what the latest exit polls in 2020 said. Republican, 31%. Democrat, 28%. Maine was R plus 3, if you're listening to the exit polls. Independent was 41%. By ideology, 30% said they were conservative. And this is one of the most difficult challenges in the state of Maine. As you can see, the voter file is not that far off. It's not even the voter file. The machine learning model that does this analysis of the voter file that we use, it's not that far off. 26%, we said. That's what, well, not we. The modeling pegged it at 26%. It's 30. Now, the difference in 26 to 30 in polling can really change a result, but it's roughly in the same ballpark. Liberal, however, is only 28. That's more than the nation overall, and it's more than most battleground states. That's for damn sure. But it's not as much as you could see in the machine learning model. That's almost 43. Moderate is 42. So clearly some of these people are overlapping. And without a doubt, you can see there's overlap here is what I'm saying. And without a doubt, that is because of this being a relatively new, how can I say it? Yeah, a relatively new development. If you go back to 2016, in the state of Maine, it was 31% liberal, 40% moderate, and 29% conservative. So in truth, conservatives ticked up about a point, which is not that significant, but it ticked up a point. Moderates ticked up about 2 points from 2016. They were 40%. Liberals fell from 31 to 28. If you're looking at by party, Democrats, if you believe the exit polls, made up 31% of the electorate in 2016. Republicans, they made up 30%. So overall, it's a net shift from D plus 1 to R plus 3. And then independents rose from 39% in 2016 to 41%. So this is going to look at multiple cycles of vote history and behavior. And over time, if you would have looked at this in 2020, which we did, by the way, and you can go back and find the old episode, I believe it was with Tim Anderson still, you'll see that it was more Democratic even than it is now. And people were saying, how did he even win the 2nd congressional district if it's this bad? Because even back then, it didn't look like there were more Republicans in the 2nd congressional district than there were Democrats. And that's why things are in the middle of evolving here. All right, so I'll put that up. But for now, let's take a look at the 2016 map. And it's generally the same as, oh, no. Let's go back to the 22 map. And listen, New York Times, I tried to use yours, but your paywall thing started glitching out, and you can't even sign in. I don't understand what in the Sam hell is going on, but I tried to use you just to because they have generally good tools even back then, but it wasn't working out. It was having a knit. That's 2012. Mitt Romney lost both congressional districts. He won one county, all right, which is, of course, I'm going to butcher the Sam hell out of this county. Piscataquis. All right, think about what areas. All right, so you know what Portland looks like because you got an image of Portland in your head. Have you ever seen, Laura, what's that show we loved? I'm trying to explain the 2nd Congressional District. Stephen King writes about the areas of Maine that are the 2nd Congressional District a lot. And I believe the show was even based off something Stephen King did when he could still write. Because he can't now. He's lost all of his talent and he's terrible. Some people call us cursed. We call it troubled, right? What's the name of that show? Think about it like that. You guys, you know what I'm talking about. Somebody in the comment section must know. Think about it. Laura, Haven!
Come on,
Haven!
man.
Some
We
people
spent
call
a
us
whole
cursed.
summer binge
We
watching
call it
You
trouble.
can't remember?
Baby, I'm getting old. And only thing
Blacker.
that's starting to remain in my mind is the lovely memories of you, the children, and the numbers. And that's really all I have. That's all I have left in this dome of mine. I better start taking ginkgo biloba. Telling you. All right. But yeah, I mean, in truth, Laura, Mitt Romney could even carry some of those areas. All right. And people did know about it. But it's a great show. It's a great show. But in truth, Mitt Romney, as you can see, basically got crushed. He got crushed everywhere. He lost by almost 17 points. Let me take a sip of coffee. Now, let's look at Donald Trump. Because there's really no point to bring up 18. And in fact, I guess we can. Hold on. I mean, 08. I bet you there is 08. And you'll see how Romney did. Let's just do it to prove a point. I mean, McCain. Same freaking thing. What's the difference? There's McCain. McCain got thrashed. McCain lost by almost 18 points. All right. Now let's look at Trump for 16. That's the difference. Pictures say 1,000 words, don't they? Don't they? Now let's look at 2020 before we go to my map, which is crazy. I'm going to warn you. Because of the way votes were reported in 2020, how things were done. There are certain areas of Maine, okay, that there just aren't. We'll look at it by county, and you can shade it by county like this. But the truth is, because it's done by congressional district, the way we had displayed it in the live result map of 2020, and it really came from Decision Desk, is they did it by areas, by like precincts, basically, which are in different districts. And in some, they don't really report any results. There's some parts of the state that are so remote, there are no results in those boundaries. All right. I know it's crazy. If you do it by county, it looks super easy. But there's very, very remote areas. Again, some people call us cursed. We call it trouble. It's like that's like the one town. For how long could you get in that blue Jeep of his and or truck of his, whatever it was, and drive from Haven to the next town? I mean, that's real in Maine. And I love it. I think I'm not mocking it. I love the state of Maine. So just to make sure people understand, I'm not mocking it. All right, now here's 2020, where Trump actually just won some by a larger margin, but he did lose Portland by a larger margin, which is getting back to the one area where there is an age group, younger age group, obviously because of Portland. There's a younger age group where he did worse. And everywhere in some of these other areas where Republicans or not Republicans, where Trump broke into for the first time outside of where Romney and McCain and even Bush could compete. And by the way, Bush was from Maine. You would have thought it would have had a snowball's chance in hell. Let's be honest. His family's had a house there forever. He was the governor of Texas, but his family lived in Maine, folks. All right. You would have thought he would have been able to do better in some of these areas, and he couldn't. But you can see that with the lack of a serious third-party candidate in 2020, and with those, because there are a lot of significant third-party votes in Maine. With the lack of that, Biden did better than Hillary Clinton did in some of those other counties. All right. So looking at this for a second, there really are regions that exit polls break it down to, and it's not, we'll go over them in more detail. So you have Portland, the Portland area. All right. And let's go to mine. Well, let's look at my map, and then we'll look at it like that as I describe the exit poll regions because they matter. I know it's going to look crazy for a second. I can show you by congressional district, and I can show you by the reporting areas. All right. This is how dispersed Maine really is. Now, we can look by Maine 1. And when I say the Portland area, obviously, we're talking about right here. And that's always the first listed region in the exit polls. That's about 17%. Okay. This is why Southern Maine, this is the area that's crucial for Democrats winning the state statewide. Let me go back to the state overall. God, I hate this. I'm getting a new mouse. This thing drives me nuts. All right. When we say Southern Maine, which is a huge chunk, 36% in 2020. That's what, and just to make sure, it was pretty much the same in 2016, if I remember correctly. In Maine, it may not have. In 2016, they may not have had region for Maine. I don't think they did. But they did in 2020, which is great because there is one poll that does a good job in the state of Maine. I think Emerson and like one other in the last 2 presidential election cycles had done decently in one of those cycles, I believe. But there is only one poll that knows how to poll the state of Maine, which is an incredibly difficult state to poll. And I'm just going to give them credit for it right now. Hold on. That's the Senate polls, but it doesn't matter. It's all the same. They did the Senate as well. Cloudflare is verifying me right now. Come on, Cloudflare. Hurry up. All right. Yeah, because look, Tony Fabrizio bombed it, had Gideon beating Collins. That, of course, did not happen. Let me just go to the president. Election polls, 2020 polling averages by state. Come on. Google sucks. No, Google doesn't. Well, Google does, but I mean, the where they put their ads is just invasive. I guess they didn't have presidential polls in 270 to win. I thought they did. I'll have to go to Real Clear Politics, but for some reason, I'm not seeing that one poll, which is the right poll. Why is this poll gone, Laura? Why is this poll all of a sudden gone? I know, right? What? Every time I see something like that, I get highly suspicious. I think it's because these are head-to-heads. And in the head-to-head, they didn't only do head-to-head. Okay, so either way, it's done by the Bangor Daily News. And I'm going to find it right now by clicking on it and looking at who their pollster is, because they deserve recognition. In 2016, we did not poll the state. But I can tell you that at the end of the day, this was the only poll that saw, because 2016 was so important because it was the first time it happened. All right. Jesus. The ad stuff is just awful. I want to call it DRI. I just am not 100% sure, and I want to make sure I'm right. It's the pollster who conducts the poll for the Bangor Daily News. I can't take forever on this, so I'm sorry, guys, for not being able to do it for you. But DRI, I'm right. There it is. They were the only ones for the last 2 presidential cycles in a row to actually call it correctly. My God, look at that ad they have on the bottom of this page, Outbrain. Anyway, so Southern Maine makes up 38%, and this is how Democrats, to give you the short answer, are able to win. It's not just the Portland area, all right, which is around here. All the way, when they say Southern Maine, they're doing the coastal areas here, all right, and that is what Democrats are able to hold on to. If you remember the map I showed you with Biden, and if this voter analysis would kick up and give an actual, what I'm talking about is Lincoln to Hancock, or even Lincoln to Washington, because Washington goes to the edge over here, but you could see this is Washington County, and you can see Republicans are doing well. But all in all, they're going to call that Southern Maine, and without outside of the Bangor area anyway, and without them being able to break into things outside of that one county, there's a lot of votes there, and this is a disproportionate state. If you thought Nevada was disproportionate, meaning, for crying out loud, for every 70% of the statewide vote comes from Clark County in the state of Nevada. 70%. Ballpark, 13, 15% comes from Washoe, the Reno area. And the rest comes from the entire rest of the state. That little bit that remains. And no matter how much you crank out that rural vote in Douglas and in Elk, which you need to do, of course, you're not going to offset getting completely hammered in those other two counties, or even losing them bad, one really bad and barely carrying another one, or not carrying another one at all, barely losing it. You've got to perform in the areas, you got to perform at least to some minimum standard in the areas that have significant votes like this. And Republicans would have to do better in areas like Northern Hancock, which under Trump, he started to do. It's just not that much. I mean, well, that particular precinct is, but look like Franklin, Bennington, he did really well in. Look at some of these votes here, but look at how small they are. And then when you get to bigger vote shares, Cherryfield is a nice chunk, don't get me wrong. But look at that compared to the votes that are in Windham. Right? So many more votes. And then, by the way, there are still some parts of Northern Maine that go Democratic. And Trump lost this by 10, but if you really look at it, it's like 200 votes. It's 10 because we're only looking at 2,000 votes. So something here would have to, Van Buren, yeah, he lost that, I believe, in 2016 as well. Barely lost Wallagrass. But every time there's one that's a Fort Kent is one that, but you need to make more progress than the 3-point win, 2-point win. All right. So I'm just trying to give you some idea how much more dispersed the area is. Bangor and Auburn, that's 18%, and down east up country is 30%. So, you are racking up when you're talking about, that area of the state, you are racking it up. If you look at the 1st congressional district, ton of votes there, obviously. Let's look at the actual 100. They didn't show it, but I can get it for you. And that's the 2nd. Again, this has changed in 2020 or 2022. It had slightly changed, which is why the Republican could not, and ranked choice voting also. But Republicans underperformed in 2022 without Donald Trump on the ballot in the 2nd congressional district. And Paquin was in the beginning of his, I don't want to say career, but in the beginning of his pitch to be a congressman, had been more America first. And that kind of lightened up over time. But at the end of the day, I really just think it comes down to, you can't get that kind of vote out of that district. And as Robert and I have said a million times before, and we can see it if you look in age, the 50 to 64 category that barely votes for Donald Trump, but it votes for Donald Trump, does not vote Republican. All right, so let me show you that here in the exit polls. And then we're going to go to I'll explain this to you when we pull this up. Just give me 1 second. I'll show you this. And this is where the underperformance comes for Republicans. I mean, no doubt here too, but that age group, which is 31% of the electorate, okay, is where the underperformance comes in the 2nd congressional district when Trump is not on the ballot. And I can pull up 2022 and you can see nope. On PBD. I'm going to have to go to it myself. I can't have these all up all at once or else we'll freeze. So I have to do it one at a time. So I'm sorry for the pause, but that's where it comes from. He does do slightly better with Republicans got absolutely mutilated with the 18 to 29 in Maine. They got killed in 2022, but it is a midterm election, and you have to consider that the possibility that there were some voters that were, perhaps more inclined to vote Republican who would have voted if they would have come out, if those votes. Here we go. Gotcha. If those, if it was a presidential cycle, they just don't vote in midterms. All right. So there were 300 and only 311,000 and change votes cast in the 2022 midterm in Maine's 2nd congressional district. The Democrat Jared Golden was won 48.2%, and Bruce Poliquin won 140,000 vote, basically 138,977, or 44.6% of the vote. Tiffany Bond, who was an other candidate, got 7%, which probably did hurt Poliquin a bit. But the bottom line is, and I can show that to you, but I will, because that's where it's coming from. The bottom line is this was a gross underperformance among that age group. And look at the 45 to 64 altogether. Oh, come on. Look at the 45 to 64 altogether, which Trump carries by 3. Here's how Bruce did in the House. There's the 2nd congressional. And you can clearly see he underperformed quite a bit. Quite a bit. So, how can I put this? Maine, the problem Republicans have in Maine is the same problem they have in like an area like Northwest Wisconsin. There is a group of voters who, if they come out, it is not, without Trump on the ballot, it is not at all certain that even if you can get them out, that they will vote for the Republican. And I know that there are so many people who support some of the other Republican candidates, and there are so many other pundits who just can't seem to understand how this could be. They just don't get it. They're like, it's not impossible. It doesn't make sense. And my candidate would just do better. But we've seen this before. Their candidates outside, there's only one that you have any, there's only one that there's any evidence whatsoever that he can do better with these groups. Mitt Romney got killed. Killed. Even in Bangor. Crushed. He got crushed in southern Maine. He got a chunk of the upcountry. Just one county. He also happened to get crushed in that area of Wisconsin that I'm telling you about. They're slightly obvious. They're slightly similar people, attitudinally speaking. Slightly similar. Different. Well, there are certainly people that are Catholic, French, Canadian descendants that are living in Northwest Wisconsin. It's just not the same, the significance that we see in a state like Maine. And then the problem is that they don't break into, when you looked at that voter analysis and you saw it was like 48% Protestant, you're like, whoa, how do Republicans not win this state? They're 48% Protestant. Because in Portland and other areas like that, they're like the old WASP. White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. They're like the old WASP. And now those people are liberal virtue signaling Protestants. Not the traditional Protestant or the mainstream Protestant or the evangelical Protestant, the non-denominational. They are different. They're the Protestant that lives in Kings County in New York City. They have more in common with them, or the Protestant that lives in Martha's Vineyard. They are woke. They want never mind. I don't want to get into controversial stuff today. They abandon doctrine for policy before everyone else does. Let me put it that way. And that's a really good question. Somebody just asked, where should Trump rally in the 1st congressional district in order to win more votes? That's a great question. I actually think, listen, I'm a big believer that you should never limit yourself. I never understood the idea of not going into the lion's den where other parties have strongholds. Have you ever seen the Democratic Party stay out of rural areas because, maybe they don't pay as much attention to them? But for instance, we were just talking about Roy Moore being defeated, in that special election. Did you see the Democrats staying out of traditionally Republican areas outside of maybe the Wiregrass? I mean, they went areas, Connor Lamb, great example. Did you see him stay out of parts of Westmoreland and, that Rick Sancombe really needed? No. I can't even count. I mean, the redo election, I can't remember his name, but the redo election in North Carolina where there was voter fraud with absentee ballots. So, he was certainly considered to be a good candidate for a state like North Carolina in that area, had a military background. It was a former Marine. There are a lot of Marines in that area. So they thought he could do really well. Did you see him stay out of traditional Republican military areas? No. So if it was me, if you look on the map, and let me pull back my map to answer that question, because that's a really good question. And it's not just a rally. I honest to God would not say that. I mean, you could rally, but it's a small state and you're not going to get a lot of like this huge group that's going to show up. I am much more, when it comes to doing work in states that you're trying to change and flip, I am much more in favor of the intimate settings. Maybe go to, events in that area of the state where, it means a lot to the community, even if you may run into some serious areas. Remember that Trump cut this margin in half without doing anything. He's never been to the state of Maine to campaign like that, folks. Their campaign never focused on that state. As close as they got was New Hampshire, folks, here. So maybe if you're campaigning in southeastern New Hampshire, you may have an impact and be able to outperform Mitt Romney in some of these areas, for instance, like York County. So I would start, because you have a double benefit there. Who asked that question, by the way? I need to be able to address you. Lamp, right? Was it Lamp? Who the hell asked that? Sorry, Jim, right? Yes, Jim. Jim, I'm a big proponent of that more intimate setting, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with going after areas where you could see potentially a double impact. Where did Trump hurt here? Parts of Oxford, right? Because obviously he's winning, right? Lincoln and up. But this is Oxford County. I know it's crazy breakdown here, but let me just do a shape like this. This is Oxford County. He's winning this enclave. This borders on New Hampshire here and is a little bit more liberal, or at least it has gotten more liberal because of transplants. But more, when you get more into Eastern Oxford, you could see Trump doing better in like Otis Field, obviously, and then that's the end of Oxford. But and then north of Franklin, it becomes very, very more Trumpian until it becomes so sparse population wise. If it was me, he did already increase his votes share in that county that I'm going to absolutely butcher, Piscataqui. I'm not going to kill it. And then Somerset, which is west of there. He already did, he improved his vote from 2016 to 2020 in those areas. But where he did worse was like Lincoln and Knox, which is around here in central southern Maine. He did worse here. Although in Cushing, he actually took they're just smaller areas. Again, they can be smaller areas, but he did pretty well in Warren. But these two areas he obviously did not do as well in. And then he should probably have boxed out Biden around Hancock. But Ellsworth is in Hancock. So if you just saw me hover over that one, it's Ellsworth, that's in Hancock County. So you're not going to do that well or that much better in an area like Portland. But how does Susan Collins win the state statewide, Jim? She does do slightly better in Portland. And then she wins all the other areas that are surrounding it, like Lincoln and Knox, right? And York, she did better in York than Trump did. And Cumberland, and on, and et cetera. So, you have to think about this kind of, and God forgive me, because here we go. There's going to be somebody who says something. You have to think this is kind of like a war strategy. Okay. You can see where you have them surrounded. You should probably focus on knocking out those pockets, right, of support that they have, but then make sure that you close the noose around them, just like any other tactician would do. And this is going to be obviously their biggest, strongest area in the state. But let's see if I can get Susan Collins's victory for you, and then I can link on it right here. You'll see what I'm talking about if I just shut up and get Susan Collins's results. Hold on. There are some areas of the second where Trump obviously is more appealing than Susan Collins is, but she wins the state, or has won the state, because of how she's closed the gap. Do you see that? She did so much better in York, like I said. I mean, and she's understand what's the difference here? Well, mainstream media will have you say that Susan Collins is just so much more moderate. And that's what it comes down to. That's a load of crap. Susan Collins spent millions of dollars in the state holding on. Trump didn't spend a dime. He didn't do anything. It takes attention. It takes messaging. It takes connection. Susan Collins had one state to focus on. That's it. Trump has 50 states, or 2020 had 50 states to focus on. He didn't pay any attention to Maine when it came to the campaign trail. Let's be real. And he really didn't in 2016 either, opposed to simply, he did during some of the primary stuff, but outside of going to areas in New Hampshire where there was overlapping AOIs and, not media markets, but close. And that's what, obviously you can see the big major difference here with Susan Collins. And Collins, by the way, did not lose any support from like Washington to Hancock, which is Washington County is here, or roughly here. Hancock is here. She did lose, obviously, some Bar Harbor, of course. No one's going to carry Bar Harbor as a Republican. And Mount Desert, but she did better here. Trump lost a couple of these. Remember, we went through these. And Blue Hill, Trump got killed. I think it was like 65-35. She did a little bit better. But again, she had one state. This, you might have noticed, it was on both maps. This is just a liberal pocket. But, that Trump lost by, I think it was 8 more points. But you can see she did a lot better and outside of Portland and the surrounding it. But it's more than that. Even if Trump, because she won majorly, this was one of the biggest polling blunders of this year. Only one poll had Susan Collins win it, if you remember. One poll, and that was the Bangor Daily News. They were out there on their own. I think they had Collins up by 8 or something. And she won by, 9? Almost not? Yeah. Very, very close. Everyone else had Susan Collins down. Tony Fabrizio had Susan Collins down. The New York Times had Susan Collins down. Everybody had Susan down. And at the end of the day, she carried it, and she carried it easily. Think about if Trump was to eke out Maine by a point or two, he wouldn't need to do all this. He could do worse in and around the Portland area, but simply do better in, from Washington on. And that could give him a small victory. If he did better in Waldo, if he did better in Knox, which is Waldo's like here and Knox is south. There it is. I just had it. If he did better there. And we just didn't see that. So Again, though, the big difference is that Susan Collins had a whole lot more time and resources to spend in that state. And they would have you think that it's about ideology, and it's not, because it just showed you that there aren't enough. There really aren't that many moderate Republicans. It's when it comes to whether you're liberal in Maine. If you're conservative in Maine. That's it. Or I would say if you're a Republican and truly think of yourself as a Republican voter, there are moderate Republicans in Maine. Don't get me wrong. There are. And there are going to be some of those voters that somebody like a Donald Trump just cannot win. But, you can try at least to offset that with areas like Oxford and York. They voted for Collins. She was, I would say, this time in deeper trouble than she normally is. And I always say this, but if you look at places like Oxford and York, I would dare say that it helped her that Trump was on the ballot more than she helped Trump being on the ballot with him. And we can see that because in the most Trumpy areas, she had obviously, no issues, none whatsoever. And there was a vote that came out. Look at how many votes there are, 820,000 votes. Folks, even I think last time it was 700 in the midterm when she had to deal with she won in a midterm last time. It was a pathetic vote share, and that's why she won overwhelmingly. But it was 2014, and I think overall turnout was, somebody have to get it for me, but I was 43%. It was horrible nationwide. In Maine, it's obviously going to be a little bit better, but I'm going to say it was like 600,000. I'll check right now. Actually, let's not guess. Okay. Let's actually take a look at it because Maine usually, I'm actually just right about on the money. It's 600,000. Right on the money. And she won 68.5 to 31.5. She won every single county. Every single county. But that's what happens when, nationwide turnout was in the 40s, but in Maine, it was only about 60%. And that's not a lot for Maine at all. Maine is a high turnout state. And when 80% plus of the state come out, it's much harder to win. And Susan Collins clearly got people that come out and go, and because Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama, there wasn't that kind of turnout. So there were people that would come out in the 2nd district and vote, for Donald Trump, but not vote for Poliquin, for instance, that would obviously vote for Collins if they're coming out to vote for Trump and she's on the ballot there. Just check it off, whatever. But that just doesn't happen for America First and for Trump with that moderate Republican. So, that was a really good question, and I went down the rabbit hole with it. But yeah, Lewiston, Bangor, you could probably crush. You could squeeze a lot more votes out of there if you're Donald Trump. Mark, I think, just said that, but or Jim again said that. Mark is bringing up the lumberjacks and lobstermen. And by the way, Mark, you want to talk about the areas where there is a deficiency in participation. It's that group of society. It really is. And I know that because once upon a time, my brother was a lobster fisherman. These guys don't participate like the Bush Republican participates. So yeah, I mean, that's really where it comes down. Yeah, but 08 Lamp, don't go beyond the don't go beyond the 4-cycle threshold, because demographics just get so crazy. I did show McCain just for shits and giggles, but when you're talking about like the whole totality of it, Maine in 08, even age wise was a lot. It's just a lot different. And let's see. Let's go through. Laura gave me a whole bunch of chats here. Let's go through. Oh, I answered Jim's, and that's in the 1st congressional district. I mean, I really would, again, just to size up Jim, I would York, Cumberland. I would not shy away from going into the lion's den. So if you look, oh, Cumberland, oh my God, I would not shy away from it. Why would you do that? When you have an area where there are so many votes, Trump increased his vote share and his vote margin in Honolulu, Hawaii, folks. Honolulu, Hawaii. In 5 boroughs. In Los Angeles, California. If you could slice off a chunk of an urban vote advantage for a Democrat, it does a lot of damage. Sure, you can, obviously, you want to shore up your own areas, but I mean, for me, that's what it's about. Washington should have been completely red for Trump. Shouldn't have lost anything. Hancock, same thing. Now, again, he served no time in that area. He put no money into that area. So, it's that this is all like just natural and organic. The difference of the change between 2012 to 2016, which stayed in 2020, was just all organic. That was not due to anything. That you could put into the category of strategy or voter outreach, getting out the vote. Nothing. It was just totally organic. So yeah, I would go into the lion's den. And people say, "Well, Rich, why would you do that? It's only, it's only a few electoral votes. They give by district." Well, because New Hampshire's right next door. Eventually, if you want to start chipping away at that, that's not 240 electoral votes anymore. But if you want to start chipping away at that advantage that Democrats start out with, you got to do it somewhere. You don't have to, because let me let you in on a little secret. If you're Donald Trump anyway, you don't have to worry about Ohio. You don't. I don't care what Ann Seltzer is talking about. You don't have to worry about Iowa. Other Republicans do, but you do not. You don't have to worry about Florida. You can spend your time elsewhere. Now, I would not ignore these states altogether because I don't like ignoring any voters. But look at the schedule in 2020. Hell, look at the schedule in 16. He expanded in 16. In 2020, he spent his time defending. And that was a mistake. COVID was going on, and I get that. But in politics, when you're on the defense, you're losing. So you start with Maine. You chip Maine off one cycle. Oh, but he lost by 8 points. John Kerry lost by almost 8 points in Virginia. And guess what? Barack Obama won it the next cycle, and Democrats have won it every cycle since. Every presidential cycle. So, at that point, you have to do it. Why was Trump AWOL in 2022? And LePage was a rhino this time, and he lost. Yeah, see, when did Paul win? When he was a cocky, very brash and crass, right? They intimidated Paul LePage. He started getting in line. He got scared. He was not the same Paul LePage who won in the past, despite polls showing he would lose, except for his very first race. I believe it did show he was going to win his first race. But that's what happens. You get soft and you lose. Because people wonder, what does this guy stand for? Oh, I like that. What areas of Maine would be a good predictive indicator of Trump doing well in the Electoral College? Well, if he was outperforming his 2020 margin in York and even Cumberland, but like Washington and Hancock as well, because there's just not much more he's going to squeeze out of Somerset, areas like that. But if he was doing better in York, I think if it was one county, I would say it would be York and even Oxford. Oxford's a good one too. Why? Because you're bordering on New Hampshire. York, you border too on Massachusetts right there to the south. So, and let me show you this map, guys. It's spinning around, so I haven't gotten a chance to show you yet. But If I show you this, then you'll get an idea of what the hell I'm talking about here. I wish it would load, but it's not. It's doing its thing. This has happened to me. If my computer needs an update, that may be what it is. All right. So here's Portland. It's in Cumberland right here. Okay. Let me see. Maybe if I just refresh it, it'll work. Since we're looking at it, it's possible. Although I do need to run and take a commercial break here real soon. But okay. Yeah, timed out. But here's York. Okay, where Susan Collins did better than Donald Trump. Borders on New Hampshire. You can see to the west, right there is Concord and Manchester. Trump did better in both Concord and Manchester in 2016 than he did in 2020. He underperformed there pretty badly, actually. All right, now, it was like, how can I put this? He was underperforming there worse than he was underperforming in the rest of the Electoral College. So it was just an indication that, oh man, Biden has a better, or, definitely Biden has a better chance of beating him than Hillary Clinton does looking at this just alone. Because why? It's whiter and there is a lot of working class in that area. It's gotten, because of Massachusetts transplants, it's gotten a lot more liberal than it was in the past. But, if he's doing better in areas like this, and even, by the way, there are some pockets up here of Democratic vote in northern New Hampshire. If he did better in Oxford, it could be an indication that he would do better in northern New Hampshire, which again, he did worse than in 2020 than he did in 2016. So that's why I would say, Washington and Hancock, that would have to do with how he's going to perform in the rest of the state overall. But when you're talking about the Electoral College impact, then, if he is really would be doing better in those two counties, then he's probably going to have a chance of carrying New Hampshire. Now, in 16, that wasn't necessarily the case. But again, we're talking about under the scenario or hypothetical scenario that, like, let's say Trump would actually make a play for me. Okay. So it would tell us whether or not that play is actually going to work. All right. Really good question. Take a real quick break though, and this we'll come back and we'll answer more questions. And I'm going to weave, by the way, your questions into the second thing, because we really do have to talk about, and I wanted to use the Emerson poll to do it, but we really have to talk about this ridiculous analysis of polling that I'm hearing. All right. It's absolutely insane. And by the way, how stupid does a certain pollster have to feel now that both before and after your polls came out, you were the only one showing that for your candidate? The only one. I mean, at some point, folks, this isn't 2016. All right. This isn't, I guess, a bunch of pollsters just don't know how to poll Donald Trump. His support is different somehow. So maybe these pollsters like me, Trafalgar, are right. And this is a closer race than people think. And actually, I think me and Trafalgar are the only ones who showed that Trump would actually win. Others showed it was closer, but I'm not sure anybody else showed that Trump would actually win. Rasmussen was dead on with the popular vote, but they didn't do state vote. We did both. And Rasmussen did popular, and Trafalgar did states, but not the popular. We did both. So I think it was only us and Trafalgar that showed that. That's not what's going on here. This is an internal pollster being the only one showing the race in a certain light that happens to be more favorable for his candidate than every other pollster is showing. The Emerson poll was absolutely damning, because before it's like, okay, the Harvard Harris and 10 other polls, starting with ours, by the way, come out and show that, in fact, DeSantis is a weaker candidate. All right. And then they come out with theirs, and it shows DeSantis is somehow a stronger candidate. And now we have two polls that have come out since that shows the same thing, the polls prior to their poll. I mean, this is just nuts. And in order to avoid having to deal with that reality, we're getting a lot of analysis about polling that is simply not true. And we've got to address it. Okay. We just have, and amazingly, Spencer says it in his actual press release. And yet people are just, including Fox News, are parroting things that are contradictory to not only his statement, but basic, not common knowledge, basic knowledge about polling. And this has got to be addressed because this is something I've long had a problem with, folks. Long had a problem with. Head to head, or Biden leads or Hillary leads Trump by 2 in this state. Well, then she doesn't lead him at all. It's a statistical tie. Anyway, we'll get into that though. All right. Let's take a real quick break and tell you about 4 Patriots. Are you prepared for the summer heat? Authorities fear that extremists are targeting the U.S. power grid. That's according to Time magazine. If just 9 key substations would go down, it would knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. In this heat, it literally could be life-threatening to some people. And that's why you need a solar generator. The new Patriot Power Generator 2000X is portable, but it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, even your refrigerator. And grab that ice cold drink in this heat. Right now, you can get one if you go to 4patriots.com and use the code TPP10 for 10% off. Use it at checkout. It's for your first purchase only, so make it count. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code TPP10 to get your Patriot Power Generator today. And real quick, before we go back to our regular schedule program, let me tell you about this great deal from our friends at Jam and Bean, who have done it yet for another month. We're almost at the end of the month, and I don't know if they're going to continue for this next month yet. I haven't made that clear yet, so take advantage of it while you can. All right, whether you're grabbing a new subscription for popcorn or their coffee, which is amazing, use the promo code TPP40 at checkout. And that'll get you 40% off your initial subscription cost. Plus, you will still get 10% off on those renewals every month. So whether you're like me and you like, of course, freshly ground, professionally, talent, roasted, fresh roasted, quality imported coffee beans that you like to grind yourself, or maybe you'll grind it around. And when you have the time, you brew yourself up that amazing, unparalleled fresh cup of coffee, or you're just too busy and sometimes you need a K-cup. We do both. Whether you get that, one or the other, you start the new subscription, use the promo code TPP40 at checkout. Again, 40% off that initial subscription, plus you will still get the 10% off on your subsequent renewals each month. All right? It's a great Jam and Bean, great company. Send us your feedback. Let us know what you think. And let's see, where was I going here? Okay, before we get back to Maine, okay, let me just do something real quick. And let me see if I could tie this into one of the questions here. Something I thought I did say. Where in the battleground states are the Trump only votes, and how much are there in each of these states? That's a whole show, NL. But I will tell you this. In places like Wisconsin, for instance, it's everywhere. It really is. But we always focus on the Northwest because it's so pronounced. But there's in central Wisconsin, eastern Wisconsin. There are some, let me put it like this generally too. And in a state like Minnesota, there's like 300,000 of them, if you want a number. But it's a coalition that's made up. Of course, there will be some in the suburban areas, but it's ironically this strange coalition of urban and rural vote primarily. And maybe, how could I put this? Now, the rural is more, collectively, it's more than the suburban. But there are, of course, some of these voters in suburban areas, but it's odd. It's a crazy thing that somehow, look at Georgia, for instance. Walker did about as good as most Republicans do in rural areas. He didn't do as well as Trump. He just couldn't do it. It was a few points here behind, a few points there behind. And when you add that up across, depending on the state, you have states with 54, 67 counties, Florida, Pennsylvania. When you add it up in a state like Georgia, it really adds up. It becomes a significant vote. And then in urban areas. Compare Walker's vote share in even Fulton County to Trump's. Compare other Republicans' vote shares in, for instance, areas of New York City to Trump's. Chicago. I mean, it's a crazy phenomena. And then again, of course, it is some in the suburbs, but folks, it has always been the conventional wisdom that, conservatives, Republicans win the rural areas, Democrats win the urban areas. And then, depending on the vote share in the suburbs, that's what will decide a state. Wouldn't it be crazy if urban vote shares got much closer than they have been in most modern cycles, and Republicans maximized the rural vote share? The suburban vote would all of a sudden become a little bit less important. It just would. You wouldn't want to still get killed in it, but you wouldn't get killed in it if you're somehow increasing your vote share in the urban areas. It's crazy. Politics is like that. It evolves constantly. And, I just don't think I wanted to play that Larry Hogan thing. I did want to play. I see that clip. I see that question from Garrett and NL as well, talking about that Larry Hogan clip. I did want to play that. I will probably wind up grabbing that clip and showing it. But for now, that's how many in each is a really big, complicated question. It's something that we're actually still trying to work out as far as nationally. There's been some in these battleground states where we kind of known for a while, but that's why we started to do what we started to do in this new round of polling. I'm sorry, I'm just digesting some of these other polls that I've seen come out. Again, that's another. I could use the morning consult to do this as well, but the bottom line is that moving from 58 to 57 and moving from 62 to 59, it just simply doesn't matter. That's noise. Now, if over time you see that this trend continues, then that becomes a trend. But really, at the core level of statistics, folks, there's a sampling error. And if the change is within the sampling error, it doesn't matter. It's noise. Now, you have to wait for a trend that can develop, but it's noise. Secondly, I have to address this. You cannot have a margin of error if you are an online panel, okay? That is a confidence interval, which is totally different. I'm looking at the time right now, and I wish I would have had more time to talk about this. But a confidence interval is online opt-in, totally randomized among a population which you're reaching by the same mode and everything is consistent, could have a margin of error. The new term sampling error is meant to, and that's why we use it, because we're mixed mode. It's meant to give a more accurate understanding of this new world, accurate understanding of potential error of a poll in this new world, where we're not looking anymore like random digital dial and it's 100% randomized. It's not. The principle of randomization is still there, but things have changed so much, and we're reaching people on different modes that it's not that simple anymore. So again, if you have like an opt-in major panel like YouGov, for instance, there's no margin. It's incorrect for them or anyone to claim that it's a margin of error. It's not randomized. They have been opted in. And yes, it's random who is responding to the panel if the panel gets big enough, but it's not true randomization. All right. So again, that's a whole episode in and of itself, but that's minor point I wanted to make today, compared to the point of, if somebody goes from 16 to 18%, it's within the sampling error. It's not really any different than the support they had before. It's just noise, things shifting around. All right, let's play Larry Hogan's clip, because I got something I want to bring up with someone else's question. Hold on, though. Let me grab his, let me see if I can grab it right from, oh, they did a restricted private video, you little doggies. Oh, you little doggies. All right, let me see if I can put it up on the screen. Just as, why would they do that? Nobody wants to see this video anymore? Is that what's going on here? Nobody wants to hear the video? All right, let's pull it up. Here we go. This is a minute and 20 seconds. And again, I think what Larry Hogan is speaking to is trend, and he's right. This didn't sit well with other campaigns, especially DeSantis campaign, but it is 100% the correct. And I can't believe I'm saying this because Larry Hogan doesn't say things. He doesn't say very smart, accurate things most of the time, but here he did.
Evaluate Ron DeSantis so far. I think DeSantis has really underperformed. You know, he started out, and we've seen this happen before in other races, but he was the one getting all the attention. He was wall-to-wall coverage on Fox News. He was the only one other than Trump that was really getting a lot of attention. He raised a ton of money. He was a fairly successful governor in a big state who got reelected. And then he started making all kinds of mistakes. I think the campaign is one of the worst I've seen so far. He's dropped like a rock. And so I think people started to say, well, maybe we're willing to consider someone other than Trump. They took a look at Ron DeSantis and then went back to Trump. So
I got to stop him there. It sounds like something he would have heard on Inside the Numbers. It sounds like something he would have heard on a People's Pundit appearance on any of these shows. Because that is exactly what happened and what I've been saying that happened. The problem Ron DeSantis has is really it's multiple. He's got a lot of problems. But Larry Hogan is right to say it is really one of the worst run campaigns. I mean, the rollout was hyped beyond hyped, and it overpromised and underperformed, and it was not rolled out competently. And you can blame that on Elon Musk all you want, but it's the job of the candidate's team to protect their candidate from something embarrassing like that. And they didn't do it. Secondly, they are nothing but attackers. They don't listen to, like when they first started to attack me, I wasn't being, overly, I wasn't on the attack. I was doing what my job is, which is criticizing. And they don't want to hear any criticism. They're like a whiny little high school kid who can't take constructive criticism at all. Or, like a whiny little child who you're trying to teach to color in the lines. And every time they go out of the lines, they just rip up the paper and scream at you. I mean, it's pathetic. And that's why they ended up where they ended up. And what Larry Hogan is saying as well about it's more, let me expand on the point that he made when he said that they took a look at him and then they went back to Trump. At the point when he was under scrutiny and people were looking at him and giving him a look, maybe I am willing to go somewhere else. He bombed. That's when they were at their worst. They just made another mistake with tariffs, and they want to go on Fox News and tell you that David Giglio is lying about what he said at the damn Coalinga fundraiser. David is not lying. That's what he said. He's not for tariffs, and of course he's not. He's supported and funded by Ken Griffin. He's supported and funded by all the Club for Growthers and Ted Cruz people. Cruz Crew. It's Cruz Crew 2.0. They're not for tariffs. They never were. And when Trump came out with that, he's been talking about it for decades. When he came out with that, they all opposed him. They even opposed him during his administration. A tariff's going to be a tax on the consumer. In typical economic theory, that's true. But it wasn't when it was used as a strategy for trade negotiations. And at the end of the day, it did not become a tax on the consumer. They're also supported at least 2-1 in these Rust Belt states. At least. You don't support tariffs, then they're going to vote for the Democrat. There's no reason for a Rust Belt swing voter, Obama, Trump, Obama, either Obama, Trump, Trump, or Obama, Trump, Biden voter to vote for you instead. They will just be an Obama, Trump, Biden, Biden, or an Obama, Trump, Biden, Obama, Trump, Trump, Biden. because it's one of the major separations. It's one of the major reasons that the things that separate Donald Trump from the Republican Party, or the establishment of the Republican Party. Because in truth, and we had tried to explain this at the time, tariffs were a central part of the Republican Party's platform. They weren't America first with Donald Trump. He didn't create that phrase. He resurrected it from the pre-Bush Republican Party. Bush's changed the party after Reagan into something it never was. And these people have been hanging on to that all through the Trump era and beyond. Sorry about that. Anyway, so that's where we're at. Let's finish listening to the rest of Hogan's clip.
So I think he dropped 18, 20 points in the polls. And now you're seeing other people rise up. And there were a whole bunch of people stuck in single digits. I was one of them. We were all statistically, within the margin of error.
At least he's being honest and being statistically within the margin of error important, because all you're really seeing, and that's true of the Emerson poll that just came out, Trump's at 59. He was at 61 or 62 before. The sampling error of the poll is 4%. So it's not really a change. Statistically speaking, all you're seeing is a shuffling of the bottom tier candidates. They're just shuffling around. Maybe Pence gets 9% one month. He gets 6% the other. And DeSantis goes from 16 to 18. Haley goes from 7 to 8 or 6 to 5 or 6 to 7. Or they're just shuffling around
each other.
It's the only one being honest.
7 or 8 different people. One of them, I think, has a chance to surpass Ron DeSantis.
Is it over for DeSantis?
I think it's getting close to being over. I mean, you can always, you see comebacks. John McCain pulled a comeback and Bill Clinton pulled a comeback. But at this point, he's headed in the wrong direction.
All right, so the problem with the comeback scenario, okay, for Ron DeSantis is that in all of those instances that Larry Hogan just described, hold on. In all of those instances that that Larry Hogan just described, that you weren't talking about fields of people you weren't talking about fields where somebody was in a clear and solid majority. You were always talking about somebody fighting to be the leader, fighting to become the front runner, fighting to get that 30 to 35%, where, they're 10 or 15 points behind the second candidate at 20. This is not the same. This is very different. And at this point, the idea of a comeback isn't as possible as in the past because the majority is with another candidate. You can't make a comeback if all that's left is a minority. It's basic arithmetic. Why am I having such a hard time explaining this to some people? It's basic arithmetic. The only way anyone's going to beat Donald Trump is if he's taken out by lawfare. That's it. So let's call this what it is. This is a fight to be the replacement. This is a fight to be, if the party can pull off some way to unbind delegates, then this is a fight to be the candidate who has the most support to take the unbound delegates at the convention. Come on. Let's be real. If you entertain anything else, then you are promoting the lawfare narrative. You're promoting it. You are. You're promoting the narrative that lawfare people want you to promote because they don't want you to talk about this. They don't want you to not even talk about it. They don't want people to acknowledge that this is where this race is because they don't want to be seen as the one who interfered with the race and took out the front runner the majority wanted. They want you to believe that this is like every other cycle. And Trump is just like any other candidate who eventually had to get out because things didn't work out for him. No. What we have here is a former president still beloved by the party. Yes, still beloved by the party. He's the most popular political figure in the party. Look at the polls. And he has a majority plus support. In some polls, I'm forgetting it. Starts with a C, but in some polls before all this, he was creeping close to a supermajority. The CBS poll shows that his real ceiling's like in the 80s. This is not like prior cycles. And if you refuse to acknowledge that, then you are doing exactly what the lawfare folks want you to do. All right. Can you please poll Georgia, Arizona instead of nationally so we can put Kurt Schlichter and Steve Deese and others to bed? I think Georgia would be a state that we could see that, as Barnes would say, the man factor with younger African-American men. Well, I mean, I could tell you we have polled Georgia in the past, and I don't know if you're talking about the primary or the general election, but we have polled both those states in the past. And, you know, the problem with them is if you look at the calendar, and I mean, that would have to be a separately funded project because we need the trend nationally. I understand what you're talking about, but we need the trend nationally. And the problem, I did this on Wednesday, and I'll pull it up again, but the problem is Georgia and Arizona are so far down the pike. Hold on. Get you the nomination schedule, pull it up again. That all of that is just nonsense talk, you know. And I imagine you're talking about the general election, right? Because you know, when it comes to the primary, Georgia's on March 12th. That's a week after Super Tuesday, which will have Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, and Virginia. With the exception of Utah, and we don't know about Alaska because we haven't polled it, and nobody's really polled it, but with the exception of Utah and maybe Alaska, Trump is going to romp damn near every single one of them. And maybe Oklahoma because it's a little weird of a system, and, you know, Governor Stitt stabbed Trump in the back, you know, begged him for his endorsement in 2022, and then he went with DeSantis. I mean, listen, you can criticize me for saying that all you want, but the fact of the matter is loyalty does matter to people. Loyalty matters to people. And when you go and beg somebody for their support and they give it to you because you're going to lose, and then you betray that person, it's not me saying it. People don't like disloyalty. Don't get mad at me because that's human nature. And I'm just simply pointing out human nature. All right. And you know, Georgia comes on March 12th. Arizona is on March 19th, 2 weeks after Super Tuesday. Those states, and by the way, Georgia's winner take most. I'll explain that to you in a second. Arizona's winner take all. And Trump is way ahead in Arizona right now. Way ahead. And this stupid strategy, this is what I'm talking about, of attacking Kerry Lake now. I have seen 5 internal polls in recent months. All right, let's say the last 8 weeks. Done by Democrats, done by the National Republican Senatorial Committee, done by someone who was doing it on behalf of a potential Republican candidate in the race, et cetera, et cetera. They all showed the same. If you look by favorability, the most popular Republican in the state of Arizona is Donald Trump. And it's not even close. I'm talking about he's super popular. And yeah, there's going to be the McCain wing that hates him, but they're a minority. And the second most popular Republican in the state of Arizona is Kerry Lake. In one poll, it was only like a 2-point difference, and the other one was like a 5-point difference, but low single digits. So you want to win the state of Arizona? You want to take all of Arizona's 43 winner-take-all delegates? You're going to trash Kerry Lake and suggest she's having an affair with Donald Trump? Unbelievably stupid. Unbelievably stupid. I can't believe. I just honestly, Laura and I were talking last night, like about the things that these anti-Trump people have done all the way since 2016. I can't believe nobody sees it. Sees it, meaning they can't see the right way forward. And maybe it happens out of frustration. I don't know. But they walk into these stupidity traps. I don't know what else to call them. Like, don't do this, and then they do it. Don't look down, they look down. Don't walk in the quicksand, they walk in the quicksand. Don't be an idiot, they're an idiot. Actually, don't stick the Lego piece up your nose, kid, and then they do it, and they have to get it surgically removed because, I mean, they're morons. In Georgia, all 59 state delegates to the convention are bound to the candidate based on the results of the primary. 42 district delegates are bound to the candidate based on the primary results in each of the 14 congressional districts, with 3 delegates assigned per district. If the district winner receives 50% or more, all 3 delegates from that district are bound to them. If none receive a majority, the candidate with the most, a plurality, gets 2 delegates, and the runner-up gets 1 delegate. All right. And then there are at-large state delegates that go to the winner, statewide winner. So I see what you guys are saying, about Arizona and Georgia. It's just that we've been, it would have to be a special project, because I really do think that, if Trump wins Iowa, it's over. It's over, because after let's take a look at and I know we're at 134 already, but New Hampshire, he's heavily favored. In Nevada, too non-white for anybody but Trump. He's going to win. And we've been down this road before. Marco Rubio thought he was going to win it because of the Hispanic vote there. And guess what? Donald Trump won it, and he won it overwhelmingly. In South Carolina, just poll came out just before. And let me look at it. Where are you? It just came out before. And it is one that has been kind of, nice to DeSantis in the past. That's the new Emerson poll. Come on, it was just a South Carolina poll. By the way, morning consults, 57-20, with Pence at 7, Haley at 3. And again, though, that's a 2-point difference for Trump, and a 0 flat difference, or 1 point difference for Trump, and DeSantis flat from the last week in morning consult. So, I mean, again, I got to tell you that is nothing. That's no change. That's statistically insignificant. National research. Trump 41, DeSantis 18 in South Carolina. Let's go over the South Carolina results here. 21 delegates, the rules. 21 delegates, district delegates that are allocated based on the results of 7 congressional districts, each with 3, all right, per district, based on winner take all. And then there are 29 at-large delegates that are allocated to the statewide winner. No threshold. Donald Trump would take every single delegate in the state of South Carolina, all 50. If national research is right, that is stronger than his performance in 2016, in which he won every single delegate. Not a single delegate would go to Ron DeSantis. Not one. So, they can talk about Arizona and Georgia all they want. And I think what you're saying is that you're speaking to the general, right? And it's like they keep coming out with these polls. Only their poll shows that they are the strongest candidate in Georgia and Arizona. Nobody else is showing that. Only their poll has been showing that, since DeSantis has hurt himself badly with a chunk of the Republican Party. And you can see that in the Emerson poll, by the way. Let's bring this up real quick. And it's funny because Emerson was actually, for somebody, for people who say Emerson is a Trump pollster, it's ridiculous. They have Trump down a point nationally. They just have Ron DeSantis down by a lot more. If you go through the exit polls, what you're going to see is that, and he actually, there we go. I want to read that comment specifically. But if you go through them, you'll see that Trump's voters move to someone else or undecided. If you go through Spencer's crosstabs on Emerson, he has hurt himself with the MAGA Republican vote. DeSantis is no longer he was beloved by MAGA before all of this. There was just some people that would say, okay, I'll vote for Ron DeSantis, but he's becoming, he's been hurt now. Mark my words when I tell you that if this continues, at the end of this, he could seriously end up like Mike Pence and others, totally damaged by the people around him, that the voter hates them. So let me just read this and all. In the 2024 Republican primary, former President Trump maintains a majority of Republican voter support with 59%, followed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis with 21% and former Vice President Mike Pence with 6%. No other candidate reaches 5%. Since April, Trump's support in the primary has decreased by 3%, while DeSantis' support has increased by 5%. In the past year, the primary has remained statistically unchanged, Kimball noted. You understand what that means? Noise. It is statistically unchanged. Yes, Trump has risen by 4 points in the last year, and DeSantis has risen by 1 point in the last year. But because the sampling error is within that, it's an unchanged race. Mark Mitchell tried to make this exact case on War Room when he came out with his latest for Rasmussen reports. It's unchanged in a year. There was a point where DeSantis did get a bump, and then he got what Larry Hogan said. He got people, they were looking at him, and they just kind of, let's be real honest, they didn't like what they saw, and they went back to Donald Trump. They're not going to go back. Not unless lawfare removes the guy. I'm just trying to shoot straight with you guys. And by the way, with the Arizona and Georgia question, all right, there is no chance. Here's Trump versus Biden in 2 different ways. And by the way, this is now the real ballot. We're going to have to do this. I may start to actually do this, folks, where I say Joe Biden, the Democratic candidate, Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, Cornel West, the People's candidate, People's Party candidate, whatever it's called, the Libertarian candidate, the Green Party candidate, Libertarian and then someone else, because Green may not get on the ballot everywhere. So I don't like to do these hypotheticals that don't exist. I like the someone else. And by the way, this is statistically really unchanged. It really is. It's just that Cornel West clearly takes from Joe Biden, but that someone else takes from Joe Biden too. So, I mean, this is a Trump win. I got news for you. That's a Trump win. If Biden only wins by a point, Trump is going to win the Electoral College. Overwhelmingly likely. He's not Republicans. He's not going to perform like House Republicans performed. Why? Because the reason why they won the popular vote but lost so many key races is because of the demographics that Trump wins and gets out that they don't. And they did better among the groups they've been like worshiping. And they want back with Trump out of the picture. The problem is that is not a large enough number. You cannot win back some of those votes and not get the Trump vote and still win. You have to do both. Or just get Trump's vote back. The Trump-only vote is bigger than this vote that they're worshiping. Anyway, where I'm going with this is if you look at that versus how DeSantis does, and he doesn't even plot it because it's so bad. DeSantis, or does he? Nope, he doesn't. So DeSantis is down. I just want to get it right. I don't want to be, I don't want to, here it is. Right? Yeah, Biden versus DeSantis is Biden +6 with 14% saying someone else and 7% saying undecided. All right. There is no chance, doesn't matter, and I love Kurt. Kurt's my buddy. But it doesn't matter what Kurt and what Kurt says about Arizona and Georgia, or what 1 or 2 of their polls say, and it is 2 pollsters particularly that are doing this. If DeSantis is running almost 6 points behind Donald Trump, he is not going to do better in Arizona or Georgia than Donald Trump. Get the out of here. No way. It means he's going to get trounced. I mean, so they're I don't want to spend, let me put it this way. I don't want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on something I know is wrong, just because they're not going to be convinced it's wrong anyway. I mean, but we'll see. Maybe we'll get a boost of fundraising and we'll be able to expand on it. Because I understand. I do. I get your frustration. I really do. Are you able to lay over the age groups, the numbers of people who actually voted? Neil, you can do that. I guess you're talking about Maine in specific, right? So let me give you a dry number right now. Hold on one second. I'll do that for you right now. And you are talking about Maine, I imagine. So unless I'm wrong, just give me that. Let's say it was about 820 in the 820 in the Senate race. Let me look at the presidential, though, because there is under and overvoting. Let me just make sure I'm right. That's about the same, 819. So give me 1 second. I mean, because the percentage. So when we're looking at, let's look at the expanded age detail. Okay, 18 to 24, for instance. 18 to 24 was, oh crap, wrong one. Hold on, bear with me. 18 to 24 with 65,520 votes, roughly. Okay. 25 to 29 was, and that's 8%. 25 to 29 was 57,330 votes. And folks, this is out of about 819,000 votes. The 13, and by the way, let me just go back and say 18 to 24, Biden carried 66 to 31. 25 to 29, 53 to 37. 30 to 39, 59 to 38. All right. And that was a bigger age group representing about 13%. That's about 106,470 votes. Now Trump starts to take at 40 to 49. He takes the lead, 56 to 38. And that is also 13% of the electorate. So about 106,000 votes, just same as 30 to 39. The 50 to 64 category is a huge category, and Trump carried it by 1 point. Most other Republicans lose it, except for Susan Collins. But again, other Republicans lost this age group and lost it badly. That's 253,890 votes. And then here's the ultimate problem. And when we're talking about the change with Maine, and be a dick here, but it's true. These people will pass, and the 40 to 49 age group will move into the larger 50 to 64 and will expand the margin for Trump in the 50 to 64. And in fact, if you look back at 2016, you can actually see some of that happening. Why? Because Trump he did carry the 30 to 39 in Maine. They were 16%. They were a larger share. He carried them 50 to 40. But then everything else he lost. He lost the 40 to 49 in 16, 48 to 46. And then in 2020, he won it 56 to 38. It was a big change. Why? Because some of those 30 to 39s moved into the 40 to 49 category. All right. So you can see the evolution of that happening. Anyway, the 50 to 64, Trump carried by 1 point, 48 to 47. He did carry it by 1 point in 2020, but his vote share went up from 48 to 50, and Biden's went up from 46 for Clinton to 49. So ultimately, with that older age group, Clinton won 65 and older, 56 to 39, but Biden only won them. But Trump rose to 40. So there was a little bit of a change there. Not much, they're big sample sizes. So, little shifts matter, but it is that small. It's noise. But you can overall see the pattern of the younger voter. This is the downside for Republicans. The younger voter got more liberal, and the middle-aged young vote to middle-aged vote got more Trumpy. All right. So as the big chunk of 28%, 65 and older, which is 229,320 votes. All right. That will start to, All right. So listen, that's just life, I mean, we all got to grapple with our mortality. There are going to be 75 super seniors that voted in Maine. And you could see from the voter analysis that I was showing you before with age, it actually kind of favors that 75, 70 really plus. Let me just give you an idea. All right. So 65 years old is 2%. But between 74 is also 2, 75, 1.5. So there is a ton of super senior vote out there. And that will, unfortunately, that's life. Tragically, those people will pass as time goes on. And so when you're looking at how these things develop in the short to midterm, you have to look at that age group. When you're looking at how they're going to develop in the mid to longer term, you look at the 30 to 54s and, the 30 to 45s, right? That's just life. So that core group, that's a bigger group, got bigger. Got more Trumpy, and then the younger that's going to have to be made though to offset the youth vote that got more liberal, because in 2016 Trump did fairly well with the youth vote. The 18 to 29 in Maine, 48 to 43. That's it. And so, by the way, again, when you hear these people say something's wrong, Trump is not behind by only 5 points with the 18 to 29s. No, he can be. All right. And 18 to 24s, which are always, it could be a little depending on the state. In Maine specifically, the 18 to 24 was more liberal, 50 to 42. The 25 to 29 was more Trumpy, 46 to 44. So, and for the Democrat, by the way, but very close, only D+2. That's not always the case. And a lot of our polling and a lot of the exit polling in other states, it's kind of crazy. 18 to 24 can be more R or Trumpy, and the 25 to 29 can be more D. And why do I think that is? I think that's probably in some states, the impact of post-graduate education. Because if you look at the distribution of how many of them have advanced degrees, that's like when in life you get your advanced degree, right? Garrett, I'm just trying to digest your question here. I know this is in left field, but saw in a local newspaper that Nashville is debating on not expanding housing zones to multi-apartment and locking in single homes. If Nashville does this, does Rich think this would drive the poor radical left into rural areas? That's, Garrett, that's a good question. That is a good question. And in other cases of political maturization, when we have seen poor, and I won't say radical left, but just like lower income move out of these urban areas and even gentrified areas, when they get to be like kind of middle class and then get out of the gentrified urban areas and into either not excerpts, but more working suburbs and rural areas, they tend to get more conservative, actually. So we even saw that with Puerto Ricans post-World War II. We've been doing a lot of research on that. My side of that was done, by the way. We did it for that book that we were going to do. And I got to eventually just sit down and finish because it was meant to be a co-authored book. So it doesn't really have the structure of an entire book, but I could just at some point figure out a way to sit down and wrap that up. But yeah, that's interesting, Garrett. I mean, it's not out in left field because we're talking about it's a voter analysis episode. So I tell you all the time that economics and stuff like that is politics, and that's true. So it's interesting, really interesting. Yeah, CJ. So Garrett, actually, my short answer before I move on to CJ is that you may not have the impact that you think. It may actually end up in making those people more conservative. That tends to happen, at least over the midterm. CJ, can you believe the submersible imploded Sunday and Biden waited to use the news as cover for Hunter the scumbag? I guess we all can believe it. It's gross. If that's true, by the way, because it looks like they picked it up on the seismic activity monitor, that's terrible. And by the way, people were piling on, what's his name, Mario, for saying the good news and the bad news. Are we really become that kind of a society where he says the good news is at least they died quicker than had they died from asphyxiation? Or, are we really becoming that fake outrage of a society that we can't understand what Mario was saying? If I was a family member of a love, and I had a loved one on that submarine, I would consider it good news if they died in a manner that was quicker. Now, that being said, our buddy Don Smith of the show, he spent a lot of time in a submarine in the U.S. Navy. It's not quite that quick. But
disclaimer though, he said good news, but not really good news in the article.
Yeah, I know. And they flipped out like, oh, you're rooting for their deaths. What a bunch of, is this what we become? Is this what we become? Just like Laura, waiting for fake outrage, to express fake outrage all the time. Is this what we become? And by the way, that tweet that I wrote about that, CJ, with the thing, that one whistleblower alone, it's worse than we thought. The FBI tipped off, or the Justice Department tipped off Hunter Biden about the raid. The FBI was furious. The IRS whistleblower said that they did recommend felony charges. And this piece of shit who claims to have autonomy, and I told you this on Monday, anyone who's or Wednesday, and before we had on the Missouri Attorney General candidate, who was a great guest, by the way. Before we had him, Will Scharf. You know, I told you, anyone who believes that they really had autonomy and that we're making this decision independently, just like, you know, just was born yesterday, fell off the turnip truck, whatever expression you want to use. That's, if you want your career path, you're going to do what you know your boss wants you to do. They heard loud and clear. Don't F with a Biden. They heard that message loud and clear. And this IRS whistleblower, just some details that we got of one whistleblower is bad enough. And I think my tweet is like blown up from yesterday. I said, it's bad. And this is just a few details from one whistleblower and from one department, CJ. And we're not a democratic system. We're a very corrupt, cartelized system. And by the way, book club members, you know what I mean by cartelized system. Jack Snyder, Missive Empire, in which the permanent government now believes they can and should decide who can even run to serve as our leaders. And one way or another, it's over after this election. It's over. Either they win and this becomes permanent, because it is going to be permanent. Folks, if they take out Donald Trump through lawfare and they deny the country, he's leading in every poll. I mean, he's leading. They deny the country their current chosen leader, then it's over. They've won. They will stop. They will drop the pretense that you get to select your leaders and they're going to run roughshod all over all of us. That's what's going to happen. Or the country tells them, you know where to stick it, elects a man they're trying to persecute, he wins, and he goes ape you know what on them, and he drags a reluctant Republican Congress along with him because they will have no choice after that. Also, the Daily Mail, right? They're the ones taking credit? Yes. The Daily Mail is not the first one to publish the tapes with Joe Biden, with John Kerry, by the way, also on the phone, talking to Petro Poroshenko and clearly stating that Viktor Shokin is not corrupt. But yet, Poroshenko said he's not corrupt. We found nothing on him. But because we know you need him gone, I told him to tender his resignation anyway, and he did it. Rudy Giuliani had been trying to tell people through the Trump impeachment, Viktor Shokin is not corrupt. Why is this important? He used the smear that Viktor Shokin, the general prosecutor of Ukraine, who was investigating his son over the Burisma and the bribes and the pay for play. He used Viktor Shokin being corrupt as an excuse, a way to spin why he said what he said to the Council of Foreign Relations about withholding the $2 billion until he fired Viktor Shokin. And he said, well, I'm saying that because he was corrupt. He called Yuri Lutsenko the good guy. We had someone good. We had to get rid of that guy because he was corrupt, and we had to get somebody good in there. But then they wanted you to think Yuri Lutsenko was corrupt, and Yuri was not a good guy. He wasn't. But he knows that. And he actually wanted to come to the United States during the Trump impeachment to explain, because Marie Yovanovitch needed that she was put forward as the bleeding heart. They painted her as a champion of anti-corruption, like a Girl Scout. In real life, Marie Yovanovitch is a miserable, cutthroat piece of right? Who was involved deeply in the corruption and is the person who walked into Yuri Lutsenko's office and told him that Biden wants the investigation against Hunter Biden dropped. When media and Western media tried to fact check the so-called list, right? Because he had said, she gave me a list of people that I cannot prosecute, right? He didn't mean a physical list. He didn't mean oh my God, there's money in there. Oh my God, it's Nielsen. He didn't mean, I just noticed that. He didn't mean a physical list, but she did give him a list of names. Like here, the blah, 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 no prosecution. But it wasn't a physical list, so that was lost translation. He wanted to come to the United States to testify during the Trump impeachment hearing that what they were saying about him was not true. Oh, and by the way, Yuri Lutsenko was not corrupt. I mean, Viktor Shokin was not corrupt. But the State Department, Trump's own State Department, the bureaucrats defied their own boss and would not give this guy a visa to come here and testify. All of that hinged Maria Yovanovitch and Joe Biden, all of their defenses and their narratives, which were fake, hinged on Viktor Shokin being corrupt. And that tape has been around since the impeachment hearing. Todd Wood at CD Media got that tape in 2019, folks. That's how long that tape has been around. And you just didn't know about it. And the Daily Mail is pretending as if they're the first ones to report it. Daily Caller even slapped their own logo on it. I tweeted it because posterity matters. And I'm so glad that tweet took off the way it did. It's currently at like 2,000 retweets. Credit where credit is due. Posterity, folks. Todd Wood was banned from Twitter over this reporting. He was removed. That content was removed from YouTube. They deleted his tapes. You may notice if you go to the website where I linked, that story is in a huge list of stories that he has reported on, much of which, if you go to, you will not even know of some of the stuff he's uncovered with Biden in Ukraine because his sources are better than anybody in the New York Times, apparently. You may notice that the audio is imposed over the same layout that was reported by the Daily Mail. Why? Because the Ukrainians put that together. The actual anti-corruption forces in Ukraine put that together years ago for you, the American people, to see. And nobody would take it. They shopped it to everybody. The New York Times, the Washington Post, nobody would take it. Fox News. And nobody would take it. Todd Wood had it first. He tried reporting it. Nobody would report it. Tucker Carlson eventually had him on several times to discuss it. But that was way after Trump was already impeached, not convicted, but impeached. It's just outrageous what they hide from you. So CJ, yeah, it makes me sick. Makes me sick. But, God be with those people and their family in the submarine because that's just horrible. And I don't care whether it was a slow asphyxiation, which it apparently was not, thank God, or a short but still rather unpleasant way. It's tragic and sad. That's about LePage. We talked about this. You saw that. Mark immediately caught in the voter file that there are people over 100 years old, up to 120 years old on the voter file. Yeah, Mark. Absolutely. And this is what, when the media, another thing they lie to you about, when the media tells you, when I say they're dirty voter rolls, and the media tells you that, no, there's no way to exploit vote by mail, they're full of crap. It's very easy to exploit vote by mail, especially when you have unsolicited mail-in balloting. Because those records won't matter if you have a system like in Florida, where you have to still request to get a ballot. Well, that person's dead. They've been dead for years. There's 120, multiple people, by the way. There's a lot that are registered as 120 in Maine. But they're not going to request their ballot. However, if it's unsolicited, they're going out. Even the application, even if that's just going out, it may land on somebody's doorstep in Portland that can't stand Republicans. In fact, they're Nazi enablers. So I'm not really breaking the law if I do this for these people that are 120 long dead, but yet still registered to vote and active on the voter rolls. I'm actually the good guy in this story because I'm fighting Nazism. What a load of crap.
Again, reiterate that that's what they're thinking, not you.
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to give you an insight into their mind. They don't think they're breaking the law. Ladies and gentlemen, somebody who worked for the NSA thought Donald Trump was a Nazi to the point where she gave up her career, her security clearance, and even part of her freedom. Of course, I'm talking about Miss Winters, to leak out of context, untrue, but yet classified, politically damaging information on Donald Trump. There are people willing to do that. Reality winner, I mean. Then there are certainly people willing to fill out ballots that don't belong to them. Are you kidding me? Of course there are. TDS was real. It still is. Thank God, though, it's not as big as it used to be. If you wanted to help in New York City, and you mean MAGA, obviously, in New York City and New York State, where should we focus our efforts? I would contact Gavin Wax, who has done an amazing job turning around the 5 boroughs and the Republican club, the Met in New York. That organization was a nothing burger until MAGA took it over. They were ineffective and useless, totally useless. However, obviously, Staten Island is a very Republican area. Long Island has a lot of Republican votes, but that's outside of NYC, obviously. But, this is what I have always believed, because if you look at the 5 boroughs, you could see Trump squeezed a lot more votes out of King and Queens than he did the first time around. I really think that there are a ton of non-white votes that are Trumpy votes in that area. And, Gavin and company, they are doing good work, and I wouldn't do anything new before I would at least coordinate with them and see what they're doing, because they've been very effective so far in a place that is neglected and underfunded. Arizona, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada in 2020 and 2022. What was the percentage of D early votes? Laura, that's a huge question that would take me a while to go over. It would take me 20 minutes to go over all of that. But you guys can, generally find that information yourself if you go through the voter analysis, or the exit polls probably don't have it, but the Fox News voter analysis, pretty close. I could show you, though, in the voter file, but it would take a very long time to go over it. How much would it be to poll Georgia, you mean, dweeb? At least like 10 grand. Georgia is a big state. AI, is that the dead whistleblower or soon to be dead one? Adam, is that the dead whistleblower or soon to be? Yeah, I mean, it's at this point, I said poor whistleblowers, because they come forward, they put themselves literally in danger. There's been other instances in the past. And sadly, I don't really see, I don't want to say this, but I have to. They're doing something that puts their professional career and even their life at risk for minimum benefit. And I think it's important to recognize that, because it still needs to be done. Yet there's just hardly any motivation to do it. If you're Vindman or you're Eric Caramel, however you say that idiot's name, he's not a whistleblower. He's not a whistleblower. He's an agent. I mean, by the way, that's real sedition. Holding an unarmed protest and challenging electors, something Democrats have done to every elected president, Republican president, in the last 3 decades. That is not sedition. Colluding with a political party, the opposition of a presidential candidate, then turned president-elect, then turned duly elected president, working with their political opposition, the intel community, with the political opposition, to fabricate a way to subvert their government and prevent them from even having their own government. That's sedition. And then, by the way, to remove them, a duly elected president, from office based on a lie, a fiction, the Durham testimony was so damning. What Peter Strzok did, what Lisa Page did, what Jim Comey did, what Hillary Clinton did, what all of those people did. By the way, Barack Obama and Joe Biden's hands are not clean in this. It's right in the report. That's sedition. That's literally sedition. Nobody ever wants to use that word because, let's be honest, they don't want it to go up to Barack Obama. Because to them, he's a protected class. He's a special kind of political figure that cannot be tainted with such disgrace. Otherwise, their worldview comes apart. But he is. And he at least allowed people who would be there after him to engage in seditious behavior. It was Joe Biden's idea to use the Logan Act with the Michael Flynn angle. Jim Comey spoke to Barack Obama about this stuff. That's actual sedition. And yet they'll watch. They will push the envelope further and try to charge Trump with sedition. Why? Because they can't beat him, and this isn't going to beat him. The Presidential Records Act, some ridiculous, twisted theory about the Espionage Act and the presidential records. If anyone should have been charged with the Espionage Act, should have been Hillary Clinton. But that's not going to, because the people see through this. So they're going to go even further. They have no choice. They're fighting for survival. It doesn't matter if it's ridiculous or not. Laura has always been right all these decades. It's confession through projection. They tell you you're colluding. They accuse you of colluding with Russians. They're colluding with Russians. And as it turns out, Devin Nunes and others would say, no, it is projection, but they colluded with Ukrainians. No, they colluded with a Russian too. They colluded with Russians too. Igor Danchenko was a Russian. He was the source of all that crappy in the dossier. It's unbelievable. But Norm, you're right. It's like now only a Democrat can call someone voting for someone seditious. What they did, what Peter Strzok, Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, Joe Biden, and yes, even Barack Obama, what they did is sedition. That's legitimate sedition. And by the way, John Kerry going to London to meet with the boss to tell him, don't worry, we're going to remove Trump from office with the deep state, so don't sign any deals with the Israelis. That's sedition. Clapper, another one. Brennan, another one. If anybody should be charged with anything like this, it should be them. Because that's an actual act of sedition. But we all know why they're protected and the opposition isn't. So wow, I really did run through all of those. But it is 2:11. Don't forget, book club Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're in The Contagion of Liberty. It's a huge chapter. It's basically the last chapter. We have some stuff to read after that because of the new edition. But it's basically the last chapter. What a fantastic book. We'll discuss what we're going to move on to next. I'll be on steak for breakfast. I got to go actually right now to be able to do it. And also, folks, it is now June 23rd. Do not forget, if you want to join locals, we have tons of members that aren't supporters. If you want to become a supporter, now is the time to do it because now you will be grandfathered in, all right, to the old like $5 a month. All right. So in July, that goes up because the cost of the products that we're going to be doing in this election cycle are just so much more. All right. And we ironically kept ours at 5 while others went to 7, even 10. So we did not do that. We held out for as long as we could. But now we're moving into this new year. We have off-cycle elections to cover. We have exit polls. We have plans that we want to do. We have the delegate maps, delegate trackers. We're going to cover every single primary. We're going to cover every single caucus. And we have to gear up for that. So if you want to get in grandfathered, you got to do it before July, okay? That is already June 23rd. YouTube, it's in the community notes, community comment section. I mean, go in there and see. We dropped you a coupon code so it can take off the month that you already paid for your YouTube if you want to make the transition. And by the way, you can subscribe to both. That's great. We have people that are actually doing that. But if you want to make the jump from YouTube to locals, where we can just share more, now's the time to do it. All right. So, we're almost basically a week away, all right, from the change. So get grandfathered in. What else am I missing, Laura? Anything else? Not really. Steak for breakfast. See you then in like 20 minutes, right? 15 now. All right, folks, all the best. Thanks for watching. And I will put up the Maine voter analysis is when we get off the show right now. Keep an eye out for it.
Have a blessed weekend.
Have a blessed weekend.
And as always, deuces.
Deuces.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. Decide it's